Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I would like to talk about gay men and the Big Five personality traits. Now, some of you might have read various things about psychology, mental health, sociology, but to give you just kind of a little introduction, I'm taking some of this from a website called verywellmind.com, the Big Five personality traits from October of 2019. This was Kendra Cherry. So we're going to give a little nod to Kendra Cherry for writing up a really good article that I think is a summary of the Big Five, and then I wanted to relate those to gay men. So as a psychotherapist for a long time, 28 years, specializing in gay men, we hear about all the big disorders. We hear about depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, ADD, OCD. Those are kind of the biggies. But the way therapists are taught, we're kind of taught that there's what we call a second part or second axis of diagnosable conditions called the personality disorders. We've all heard of this. There's a lot of talk about narcissists and narcissistic abuse. Trump, the ultimate example, the grandiose, unempathic narcissist. And we've probably heard of the antisocial, the sociopath kind of person, like, a serial killer, or somebody that's just, notorious with no empathy at all as they kill or torture, the great forensic stories of, the past and that are ongoing. But when we talk about personality disorders, what we're really talking about is that it's a trait about people that's taken to extremes. For example, everybody might get a new haircut and then enjoy it when they receive a compliment on it. Hey, new haircut, looks good on you. But they're not necessarily a narcissist. Or sometimes people might feel like they want to really rely on somebody, but they don't necessarily have the dependent personality disorder. Or sometimes you can feel on edge or feel like things aren't going well, and that, people in maybe a new job or something are sizing you up or even competing with you or a little bit out to get you. But not everybody has the paranoid personality disorder. Or somebody might be kind of a stickler for rules in general and kind of particular, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have the obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. So, according to the American Psychiatric Association and, the Bible of Psychiatric Disorders, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, which is the latest one that comes from May of 2013, there are certain recognizable personality disorders that have become clinical diagnoses. Some things we hear about, like sex addiction or porn addiction, one of the things I really fight against as a trained sex therapist. Those are not clinical diagnoses. Those were specifically rejected by the American Psychiatric Association for a lack of scientific evidence, and also that for the diagnosis or for its treatment, which is largely religious-based. And they say it's not religious-based, but it is. With the personality disorders, it's about extremes. And it's theorized that this is how children develop, that if they get arrested, you've heard of the TV show Arrested Development? That's a play on that psychological idea, that, if things kind of go wrong in the upbringing of a kid, they can get arrested, not by the police, but they can become stymied in a certain aspect of their psychological development, and then that's when a pervasive and theoretically very long-term, lifelong personality disorder can develop. And we all probably have some examples of people that would come to mind if we read the list of personality disorders. But aside from personality disorders, there's kind of another concept that's called the Big Five personality traits that mental health professionals might discuss. A psychologist, a clinical social worker like me, psychiatric social worker, licensed marriage and family therapist, educational psychologists, psychiatrists, lots of different kinds of mental health professionals might discuss clinically, including a patient, in terms of the big five personality traits. Now, what are those? What are the big five? Well, it's easy to remember because it spells out the acronym OCEAN, OCEAN. And those five personality traits of OCEAN stand for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So let's talk about that according to our friend Kendra Cherry of verywellmind.com. Now, she in her article talks about how, beginning with the research of D.W. Fisk in 1949, and later by other researchers, Norman, 1967, Smith, 1967, Goldberg, 1981, McCrae and Costa, 1987. These are theorists that contributed to the idea of the big five dimensions of personality disorder. The other way you can look at it is it also spells CANOE, C-A-N-O-E, for conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness, and extroversion. That's another commonly used acronym. But let's stick with OCEAN for now. Now let's talk about openness. This trait, according to Cherry, features characteristics such as imagination and insight. Are they open to new experiences? So people who are high in this trait might tend to be more adventurous and creative, and people low in this trait, according to Cherry, are often more traditional and may struggle with abstract thinking. So let's think about this with gay men. Gay men are kind of known in a stereotype for being, very creative, and kind of open to trying new things. Like, we tend to have interesting travel or maybe interesting activity groups. Gay men are actually represented in extreme sports sometimes because we just kind of cope with being a sexual minority by challenging these pressures, gender norms, sexual orientation norms and expectations, and we really develop, without trying, a lot of skills in critical thinking and openness. We tend to be fairly progressive people socially because we've had to come to terms with being an oppressed sexual minority. So we might, certainly have gay men who are low in openness, but in general, we probably have quite a bit of gay men who run high. Conscientiousness, the second one, the C, features a dimension of thoughtfulness, good impulse control, and what we call goal-directed behaviors. Maybe organized, mindful of details, planning ahead, thinking about how their behavior affects others, and being mindful of deadlines. Kind of like a Boy Scout. Someone who's very high in conscientiousness might have a lot of sense of preparation. They might follow through and finish tasks. They might pay attention to detail and screen for errors. And these kind of people would enjoy having structure to their lives, following a schedule, following a routine. Somebody who's low on conscientious might make messes and not take care of things, might fail to return things or put them back where they belong. They might put off doing important chores, and they might even fail to complete assigned tasks at work. So with gay men, sometimes we have a high representation of conscientiousness because we're trying to defend against being targets for some other reason. This is why a lot of times in Hollywood, where I live in Los Angeles, gay men make really good assistants in the Hollywood, entertainment industry, because we just tend to be well-behaved guys, who are ambitious in that very masculine gender way, but we can also be very conscientious in terms of balancing that with being accommodating to bosses, male or female, straight or gay. And conscientiousness tends to get positively reinforced because if we're low on conscientiousness, we might get fired from jobs, or we might get kind of yelled at for not following through on things we need to do. We might get a penalty for paying a bill late, or we might get a penalty from not filing our taxes. Whereas if you're high on conscientiousness, you might be seen as prestigious professionally because you're paying attention to detail and you have a strong sense of follow-through. And sometimes with gay men, you might have heard of the best little boy in the world syndrome. Gay men can sometimes, quote-unquote, make up for the stigma of being gay by being particularly well-organized and taking pride in their work, so that they have an edge over straight guys that might have a lot of heterosexual privilege. And so that's one of the ways that we can fight back against the stigma of being a minority. Now, it shouldn't work that way. We shouldn't have to work harder than a straight guy in order to get the same level of, professional acclaim. But historically, that's been kind of a trait with gay men, to be high in conscientiousness. Now let's look at the E for extroversion. Also spelled extroversion. Could go either way. So that's characterized by being social, being talkative, being assertive, having high amounts of emotional expression. Ooh, girl. A lot of RuPaul's drag queens would be high in extroversion, right? They're outgoing. They tend to gain energy by being in social situations. Being around other people helps them to feel energized and excited. But then if you're low in extroversion, you might tend to be more reserved, have less energy to expend in social settings. That t-shirt that's going around called the Antisocial Social Club. Social events might feel draining to introverts, and they require solitude and quiet in order to recharge their batteries. Other traits in extroversion might be enjoying being the center of attention, liking to start conversations spontaneously with strangers in the grocery store or in a train station, whatever. Enjoying meeting new people, having a wide circle of friends, finding it easy to make new friends, and sometimes saying things before thinking about them. We all know people who do that, right? People who are low in extroversion might prefer solitude. They feel exhausted if they're having to be out socializing a lot. They might be shy to start conversations with a stranger. They might get annoyed with small talk with people. They think before they speak more. They might be more diplomatic. And they kind of avoid being the center of attention. These are all things that Kendra Cherry talks about in her article. Now let's talk about this with gay men. When we talk about extroversion, what do we think? I said RuPaul's drag queen. Some of those guys might be low in extroversion when they're in boy drag, but then their drag persona lets them come out of their shell, as RuPaul's often said on that show. And drag sometimes lets you explore your extroverted side because everything is big and sparkly and, lots and lots of color and exaggeration. And then when they're undressed or when they're not dressed as their drag persona, they might be more introverted. And we probably all know about, drag queens would be extroverted, cabaret singers, performers, gay men who are comics or who are sexy dancers or, kind of flamboyant, fun guys like a Paul Lynde or a Rip Taylor. Some of these the late gay comedians might be that way. Whereas a lower in extroversion might be more soft-spoken gay men like Matt Bomer, who's very handsome but kind of soft-spoken. The next one with agreeableness, this dimension includes things like trust, giving to others, kindness, affection, and very what we call pro-social behaviors, meaning contributing to society, being good members of society. People who are high in agreeableness might be more cooperative and think in terms of the collective, whereas those low in this trait might be more competitive or even manipulative. So guys who are high in agreeableness, they might take interest in other people and want to listen to them and learn from them. They might care about others by being involved in charities. They might volunteer in contributing to the well-being of other people. They might assist people who they find are in need of help. Somebody who's low in agreeableness, they're kind of self-centered. They take very little interest in others. They don't really care how other people feel. They have little interest in other people's problems. They might insult or belittle people, go the other way, not just neutral, but actually insulting or belittling others, and certainly manipulating others to get what they want. So when we look at gay men with this, it's kind of some negative stereotypes, but let's go there. The gold-digging twink, who doesn't really like a guy, but he's going out with him because he manipulates him into buying him things. Or somebody who's high in agreeableness, might be an activist. Maybe Harvey Milk, the classic late activist, probably had an interest in other people and caring about the community. So if you think about it, you can think of people who might fit that description, the high and the low levels of agreeableness, and even in yourself. Think about some of these traits. Are you high or low in some of these? And then the last one is neuroticism. Neuroticism is a trait, according to Kendra Cherry, characterized by sadness, moodiness, and emotional instability. People who are high in this trait tend to experience mood swings, anxiety, irritability, sadness. And then people low in neuroticism tend to be stable and emotionally resilient. So somebody who's high in neuroticism might experience a lot of stress, a lot of subjective stress. They might worry about things. They might get upset easily. They might have dramatic shifts in mood. They might generally be anxious, and they might struggle to bounce back after having a setback or some kind of a stressor. People who are low in neuroticism, which we all kind of aspire to be, we might be more emotionally stable, cool as a cucumber under stress, rarely feeling sad or depressed, not particularly worried about much, and lives through life very relaxed. When we think of somebody who meditates a lot using mindfulness meditation, somebody who has a strong spirituality, somebody who has a lot of privilege, somebody who didn't really experience trauma in their life and had supportive parents and supportive siblings and didn't have any kind of financial hardship or health hardship. They might be just particularly well-adjusted people who are low in neuroticism. So think about these from the standpoint of you and the people you know. Think about your parents, How were your parents' high or low levels of openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism? How did that affect you as a child growing up in that family of origin home? Think about your partner. How do you understand your partner to be in high and low levels of those traits? Or yourself, or your boss, or your nearest coworker? Think about the people in your life and understand how understanding how these people tick can be a product of just thinking about high or low on the big 5 personality traits. So I hope you found that helpful, and if I can be helpful in more specific ways through therapy or coaching, please let me know. The way to reach me always, ken@gaytherapyla.com is the email. And of course the website, gaytherapyla.com, and it'll have a pop-up box to get in touch with me if you want. Or you can just call or text if you have questions about this, or if you would like more specialized help. I'm doing all online sessions as of this time. This is June of 2020 in the COVID era, so working online. And I or one of my associate clinicians at Gay Therapy LA would be happy to help. Also, the blog articles on gaytherapyla.com/blog would have other information about personality or relationships or anxiety. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.